We're going to be discussing how to get rid of whiteflies on ornamental plants on this edition of the DIY Pest Control Podcast. Welcome to the DIY Pest Control Podcast, where you get the best info for those who want to perform their own pest control. The DIY Pest Control Podcast is brought to you by Nature Pest. Nature Pest has been providing the finest in commercial and residential integrated pest management for structural, lawns, trees, shrubs, and mosquitoes with better control and less contamination at an affordable price. For more info, visit us at naturepest.com. Welcome to this edition of the DIY Pest Control Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, certified pest control operator here at Nature Pest. And I like to talk to you about a big problem here in South Florida with and around the country and around the world, really, with whiteflies, and what to do about whiteflies and how you can get an effective control. Whiteflies are not true flies because of their biology. They're more of a sucking, piercing insect. They belong more to the family of aphids, mealybugs, and not thrips. They don't belong to the same family as thrips, but they're similar in that they're a piercing, sucking insect. And what they do is they from the moment they're born, they latch on to wherever they're born, and they start sucking the life out of your plants, your shrubs, whether they're trees or palm trees, and they produce what is known as a sooty mold, a honeydew, which is the excrement of the whitefly. And this excrement is nothing more than pure sugar. It's glucose. And what happens is, after a while, a mold will start growing on the plant, which becomes a black sooty mold. And most people think their plants have a fungus or a bacteria, and they don't. The bacteria is growing because the sugar is there. And that is part of the biggest problem we've had with whiteflies, is the after effect, especially on gumbo limbo. Where people had gumbo limbo trees and they become infested with this whitefly known as the rugose spiraling whitefly, or the gumbo limbo whitefly. Discovered actually in South Florida, right here in Doral, Florida, in 2009. And we were already treating a lot of shrubs for different whiteflies. There are about 75 species of whitefly in the state of Florida, with about 1,500 whitefly species around the world. And they all have, the thing with whiteflies is it's always a different one on each plant, because they prefer, they're host specific. They the ficus whitefly only attacks really the ficus. Well, the gumbo limbo rugose spiraling whitefly changed all that, because it attacks many species of plants and shrubs, unlike other species that we have in Florida of whitefly, where it's host specific, one specific plant. And that is a major challenge because it got on everything. Now, luckily, that one is a bit under control because of a parasitic wasp that is here in South Florida, and that parasitic wasp attacks it and gets it naturally under control. So if you do get it on your plants, you can treat them, and with certain services that we can provide or that you can do yourself, and that way you can get control of whitefly. But you need to understand the life cycle of a whitefly. The reason most people fail to get control of whitefly is that they're doing timed program services, like spray services through a pest control company that is offered on a monthly basis, or every 2 months, or every quarter. And the problem that trying to get control of whitefly is you have to know the life cycle. If the whitefly does not care about pest control programs. It only understands its life cycle. And a lot of people are on a program that comes out every 3 months. And what happens is, in that period of time, one single whitefly could have laid as many as 600 eggs. Because their life cycle is very short, about a month usually. And in a month's time, they can lay 150, 200 eggs on a single leaf. And you can see now the multiplication taking place in about 2 to 3 months. So you in order to deal with it effectively, you have to break that life cycle. And there's 2 ways that you can break the whitefly life cycle. One is frequent spraying. In other words, in order for you to get control, you have to get it in its cycles of egg, larva, nymph, and adult. And when it's in those cycles, they're very easy to kill, and those are the cycles you got to get them. So in other words, if you have an egg, the egg won't necessarily die because you apply a pesticide on it. So when they're immediately born, they start sucking. So if you spray them about a week apart, make 3 applications, 4 applications a week apart, you should be able to break that life cycle to where there isn't a significant amount of a whitefly causing damage to that plant. The problem is that becomes very laborious. It's very taxing on people to spray them every single time with a pesticide. Now, residuals on a pesticide, most people think, well, they read a label and it says it lasts all season long. It'll last this long. That all depends on where you're at in the world. If you're in South Florida and you have our alkaline soil that destroys pesticides and the sun, the rain, well, reality is that photo degradation, which is what the sun does, a light does to degrade the product, is very quick. Usually within a couple of days to a week, top 2 weeks. So you're not going to get a long residual on a plant when you have rain and you have a lot of sun biodegrading that product. So there are a couple of options. You can use a natural pesticide, but you still have to apply it. If you read the label on whether it's a synthetic pesticide or a natural pesticide like a pyrethroid or mint oil, you will read the label that says you have to reapply the product probably within 7 days, meaning because you have to break the life cycle until you no longer find living whiteflies on there. And whitefly eggs are very tiny. You're never going to see them with a naked eye. You're not going to see the larva. Sorry, not the larva, but the pupae. It has a molting stage where it leaves these molt castings behind. And unless you have a really good lens to be able to see them or a microscope, you're not going to see them. You're depending on the visible whitefly. And these are very tiny too. So very hard to detect if you have them. And this is why most spray programs fail. So if you don't want pesticide, you want to go organic, you want to go natural, you're going to have to spray them 3 times, maybe 4 times on a weekly basis, and then inspect the plant every week to make sure that you don't have the whitefly growing again on there. And what happens is you got to pretty much spray it at the first sign of whiteflies again. In certain species like a gold mound, duranta, which is a very overly used plant in South Florida, that fly is highly transient. So if your neighbor has it and you have it and you wash it off and you get your plant clean, well, it will be on there within a week or 2. Very, very difficult to control it on the types of plants. The other thing you can do is what is known as systemic root drench treatments. Systemic root drench work with products called neonicotinoids that will enter the plant. You apply it to the soil. You don't spray it. I don't recommend spraying neonicotinoids on plants because it's going to work the same way as a pyrethrin will or a pyrethroid. It's not going to work any different. A lot of people still use a product like 7, which is a carbamate. Carbamates are if you read about carbamates are very dangerous for people. I don't like using them. We don't use them. They can be very toxic to people. And a lot of products like 7 are still on the market, which are fine products. But again, you still have to reapply. 7 is only going to last a couple of days, 2 to 3 days in the environment, causing damage to the plant, to the insect. The most of the other damage it causes is to people and the environment. So systemic neonicotinoids applied to the root, it's much safer for the environment, for bees, pollinators, because you're not spraying it. They're not attacking them. You're only attacking sucking, piercing insects that suck and bite on the plant. So when it's applied to the soil, it gets absorbed through the roots into the vascular system, into the plant. And then the plant, once the insect is born, it immediately has to feed it. It will suck on that plant and then suck in the insecticide along with it and die, causing long-term better aesthetics with plants than spraying will. So you can get control between 3 to 12 months, depending on the plant species. As if it's gumbo limbo, you're probably going to get about 3 months worth of control. If you're a live oak plant, you might get 6 months control. Other shrubs like crotons and palm trees, you can get 10 to 12 months control. Even on at the low dosage rate, you can get on ficus, you can get 10 to 12 months control with one application. So you can see you can get longer control, better aesthetics, less application of chemical, less exposure to chemicals, because you're only treating one small little site on that landscape where that plant is. You're not treating the whole lawn. You're not spraying it in the air. It's not going on your neighbor's yard. So you get much better aesthetics, much better control of whitefly. And those are the way we treat them. Obviously, we can't be on your property every week treating it with a natural product. But if you insist on using a natural product, a product like Ecovia is a great product. There's a link where natural whitefly control, and Ecovia, you can order it online, apply it. It does have a thyme oil product, and it does work very well. But remember, it kills only the adults. It will not kill the eggs. Probably not going to kill the molts until they are molting. So you need to apply it frequently, the same thing you would with a synthetic. But it's just, if you're going to insist on spraying, don't use the synthetic pesticide, because one, it's going to have the same effect, and two, you're contaminating the environment and everything. Well, that does it for today for this edition of the DIY Pest Control Podcast. I hope you guys are doing well, enjoying your landscapes, and being safe out there. See you next time, folks. Thank you for listening to the DIY Pest Control Podcast. Please remember that although Franklin Hernandez is a certified and licensed pest control operator in the state of Florida, the content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. You should consult your local and state government or cooperative extension service before performing any pest control service. Remember to always read and follow label directions, because the label is the law.